Hello, everybody. Thank you for tuning in to the Liberty Report. With me today is Daniel McAdams, co-host. Daniel, good to see you.
Good morning, Dr. Paul.
Well, good. There's a lot of excitement from talking about an election that's already gone. For months, a lot of people, including myself, we were anxious to get the election behind us and maybe get away from some of this, but it looks like the election is still going on. We're going to maybe get the CIA involved, the Russians involved, and who knows who else is going to get involved to find out really who won this election, and was there any cheating? Were the Russians involved? Wow, this is getting to be pretty important. But you know, it seems like finding out the truth is the big deal here, and there's a lot of false statements being made now, and charges made about what the Russians have done to the environs. Did the Russians get involved and mess it up, and maybe the election is not authentic, at least maybe not technically and legally, but at least emotionally wise, to distract from any support that the president-to-be will have when he's in office. So there's a lot of things going on, but it's not easy to sort out the truth from the fiction. And of course, that's the reason we put a title up. Should we believe people like Assange and Ed Snowden, or are our friends in the Senate, McCain and Graham, are they the ones who really know what's going on? I could guess which side you might come down on, but what do you think's going on, and why do you think there's such a big thing going on with this election? It's obviously not going to be let loose. Or is it just the fact that the Democrats are poor losers and they want to keep it going, or do they have a sincere desire to make sure that truth prevails and our country is prosperous and secure?
Well, I think there are a number of interests that are pushing this story. The story being that the Russians somehow hacked into the system and influenced the vote in favor of Trump. Intelligence agencies don't do that sort of thing, do they?
Never.
But, the Washington Post and the New York Times and the rest of the mainstream media has been pushing this story. A huge story broke in the Washington Post on Friday about this. And that's why we're talking about it today. C-SPAN or CNN and everyone's talking about it this morning. And the story is interesting. And if I could just make 3 points about the story itself, because these stories are fascinating when you look at how they're sourced. And if you'll just bear with me for a second. This is the Washington Post on Friday that set this whole storm rolling. It's the assessment of the intelligence community that Russia's government wants to favor one candidate over the other. That sounds pretty serious. Said a senior government official briefed on an intelligence presentation made to U.S. senators. Sounds like a mouthful, but when you break that apart and look at what they're actually saying, they're saying, here's a guy or gal who talked to somebody who was in the Senate briefing. And they won't say who it is. It's several persons removed, and you don't know, does that person have an interest in pushing forth this story? What if it was Victoria Nuland? She's a senior government official. She has a stake in delegitimizing the Trump presidency. She was going to be Secretary of State under Clinton. But there are a couple more we can go over later, but it raises a huge number of issues about journalistic ethics when it comes to the Washington Post. Dare I say it might be a fake story.
There's a lot of fake information in this. But, the big question is about the hacking and where the emails came. Did the Russians really, hack, the emails of the Democratic Party? Well, Assange has spoken out on this, and he says, no way, the Russians weren't involved, or at least the Russian government. He declined. But, several people have made the point that if they're really sincere about finding this, what we don't need, you won't get it by having a couple people, a couple Republicans and a couple Democrats getting together and holding a couple days worth of hearings to bring about the truth. But guess what? They're not going to bring the people to those committees that could give them the truth, because there is a few people in our government that knows everything, and that of course is the NSA, and they have the information. They would know exactly where this came from, but they're rather silent on this. And of course, when you read that report, you find out that it's always anonymous, but the headlines are so different. They're misleading. It sounds almost like a politician wrote those things, just to mislead the people. And figuring this out is a big job. But I just don't think that Lindsey Graham and McCain are on the right side of this issue, because there's too many that have a big stake in bashing Russia and blaming Russia for everything. And, if they can't blame Russia for all the tragedies in the Middle East, and that we may have some responsibilities there, that maybe we can get the Russians blamed on here to stir up animosity between the Russians and the United States.
And that's a good point, and I think it was William Binney who made the point, and he was a NSA whistleblower. He's the one that blew the whistle on the mass surveillance system that they were building. And I'm sure every time that I send you an email, hey, Dr. Paul, which we do for the show, I'm sure it's recorded somewhere. So they wouldn't have this, hey, how do we hack the DNC? The information has got to be there somewhere. But, again, when you look into the Washington Post story that's, sensationalized in the media, but when you get past these first assessments, they've determined that they were in there to get Trump to win. Then you talk about the CIA presentation. The CIA presentation, for which they do not have a source, they only have a source who talked to someone who was there, fell short of a formal U.S. assessment produced by all 17 intelligence agencies. So that means it was not an official product of the intelligence community, big I, big C. So it didn't have to go through the entire rigorous process whereby you can take a footnote if you're a different agency. And remember, famously, it was INR at the State Department that took a footnote on the Iraq assessment back before the war. They turned out to be right. So it didn't go through this process. They also said we don't have specific intelligence showing officials in the Kremlin directing the identified officials to pass the Democratic emails. So the question is, who might be these briefers and what might be their incentive if they did say what the Post says? Well, a lot of the senior people are Obama appointees in the CIA. Could it be someone with an axe to grind?
Yeah, and the timing is interesting, too, because obviously if they knew what they claimed, they knew it before the elections, and if they knew it was going on, maybe they would have done something about it. But it looks to me like it's just a continuation of the elections. There's some people that are really upset about the election, and they want to continue the chaos. And the other thing that feeds into this is the popular vote. The fact that the popular vote came out on the side of Hillary. So that's really feeds into this too. And I think they want chaos, and a lot of people like that. And you take like the Republicans who are sympathetic to this investigation, like McCain and Graham. They have an agenda. This is an opportunity, and they're not going to miss this opportunity because they want desperately to stop Trump, from even making some overtures toward Russia. Maybe peace will break out or something. So this is this to me is a lot to do about protecting special interests, people taking advantage of this, and I think that's what's going on.
Well, McCain has always been heavily invested in regime change. He's heavily invested in Syria. He went over there and met with a group of people that turned out to be terrorists, but he still supports them. So the idea that somehow Trump would back off, let the Russians finish off ISIS and Al-Qaeda in Syria, and then Assad would remain in power. They cannot stand that happening.
The people who are coming down so hard and blaming the Republicans all on this, they say, well, we have to find out what the Russians did. This is national security. Can you believe, that the Russians may be doing this? Yeah, I can believe it. I can believe it. The details remain to be seen, but it seems to me like what we need to do is, if it's true, maybe we ought to have better security. Maybe that's a job the NSA should be doing rather than this.
Looking at our emails.
But I don't think this argument has anything to do with protecting national security. That's not their interest. And the CIA, this is so un-American for me to say this, and that is, why don't we look to ourselves? What has been our position? What example have we set over the years? And Russia, if we exclude the Soviet Union, Russia itself, yes, they've had border fights and they have to worry about their borders now. But compared to involvement in the number of countries, no other country has ever come close to what we do on the intrigue of using a CIA, because there's probably more than this if you add up every underling that has been killed by our CIAs, and they use it routinely, and they continue to use it, and that is assassinations. Yeah. And there was an article that I found that listed 50 major assassinations, and some are big names, of countries. Some of them are pretty bad guys, but take a person like Diem, and I remember that clearly because I was in the military then. It was in the 60s, and the wars got worse after that, and Diem was, at the time I thought, he's even a Catholic, and why are they doing it? But it didn't fit our scheme, so we had to participate in getting rid of him. And what about, even if we don't get rid of him, how many elections have we been involved in? I'd like to know the exact figure. I couldn't find that, but I think we have been involved in hundreds of elections around the world. We're involved all over the place. Right now, we're unhappy with the governments in the Middle East. We have troops in 7 different countries being used actively. Oh, we're advisors and this sort of thing. Trying to dictate to them to what kind of government they should have. And then they come up with this crazy story and say, well, we don't have the evidence. Oh, yeah, that's right. This is an anonymous person. We're not saying the Russian government did it. And all of a sudden, it's just grandstanding. It's fake news. It's propaganda. It's to serve the interests of some special people. And they never say that, well, it is a good idea that foreign governments don't get involved. I'm all for watching that. I'm all for taking care of that. But the one place where we have a lot more responsibility for is, what is our own government doing? And why shouldn't other governments get involved, even against us, after what we do to all the other governments? Yes, but we are exceptional. We're the greatest nation. We need to go about, and even if we kill people, but that's different. That's collateral damage because we're doing the Lord's work. I saw one interview over the weekend with Chuck Todd and Priebus, and it was amazing. They went back and forth, and Chuck Todd said, "You mean you're not going to believe the CIA?" to me, and he did it. They went back and forth about 6 or 7 times, and Priebus always had a decent answer to him. He says, "You mean you're going to decline? How can a president ever do that? Not have trust in the CIA?" I consider that pretty healthy. But when he was doing this, I kept thinking, it's like him saying, "You don't even believe in God, do you?" You mean to tell me that you don't believe in God? And that was the attitude, that you had to believe in the CIA, and they always tell the truth. If you didn't do it, you can't be president because you have to depend on them so much. And of course, the best thing is to have a healthy understanding of the CIA, which John Kennedy did, and that tells you a story too of what happens if you even challenge the CIA. I think it's a very, very dangerous situation, and this whole thing is so hypocritical. And but it's being used once again, to promote certain causes, and that, of course, for the one, well, yeah, we have to not soften our tone with Russia, so therefore we have to really investigate them and find out what's going on. But I think this kind of a mess is a consequence of a foreign policy of interventionism, and it's just certain groups will take advantage of this and stir the pot and hope that they can get an advantage over it.
Yeah, and the whole idea, you don't even believe the CIA, you don't even believe the CIA. Well, there's a reason for the duplication within the intelligence community, and it sounds bad, but actually it has a good effect, which is that we don't know that this is a real CIA product. We only know, as we said before, that there was a briefer who said this. We don't know his agenda. We don't know who he was. We don't know that it was the CIA that concluded it. So that whole thing is under the rug. But the other thing you talked about, other nations having an interest in our elections, you had 2 candidates. One clearly said that she wanted to ramp up conflict with Russia. She was leading us to World War III. The other one said, for whatever his fault, he said, why can't we just get along with Russia? So we're to imagine that the Russians aren't going to be interested in who wins at all. It's funny, it's okay for us. And even someone like McCain, who was right up there on the stage when the legitimate elected government of Ukraine was being overthrown. He was urging this overthrow of an elected government, and here he is screaming about how the Russians are interfering with our democracy.
And your point about, is it really legitimate policy of the CIA? Well, the really big issues aren't. They're hidden. They're a subset of the CIA, because not everybody's going to know, about assassination plots. Yeah. How many times did the CIA try to kill Castro? And most of that wasn't even hidden.
600.
Yeah, and it showed up the CIA was inefficient. But that is I think a big issue. The CIA is way too secretive. They're not doing the right thing. And I think the best reason to reconsider the CIA is the president who signed the bill to the CIA, Harry Truman, because it was interesting, shortly after the Kennedy assassination, he strongly criticized the CIA. I sort of had in my mind that anti-CIA came out later on, realizing the CIA was involved. But shortly after that, Truman wrote in an editorial that that is not what was intended. They were supposed to provide a gathering source for all intelligence to bring it to the president so he would have an easier time understanding it. But he said, and he used the word, no cloak and dagger. And this was, I don't know how many weeks or a month after the assassination, no cloak and dagger operations. And I think that's a lot of what they do. Fortunately, we know, and there are some, they go in the CIA with high motives, good intentions. They did the best they could, objected to some of the serious things like torture and other things, but got into trouble if they start telling. But the people that we know and we've interviewed, are telling the truth. And one person told me that the one way you get promoted in the CIA is if you are the best liar. The better a liar you are, the more likely you are to be promoted. And of course, they have always advised that you're one step removed. If you're in some really, really nasty things, they'll hire out, they'll contract out. I think in the Cuban episode, they worked with Mafia. Mm-hmm. Mafia sometimes completed the task of this, and that was a step removed, one step removed, where nobody could, really say, oh, it was the CIA and the president approved it. So it's similar. You have a group here that's under the CIA, and then the CIA is under the president, and then the presidents have a tough time figuring out what was on. That was Kennedy's frustration, was, how do I get hold of this? Because when he went in, he was a little bit naive, but when he found out how they plotted against him, and they wanted to embarrass him into give him air support to the invasion, the Bay of Pigs, and by that time he said he wouldn't do it. So that was a part of that. But that is why, the system is so bad. And I remember there was one individual that wrote about it and helped set up the CIA and all. And his conclusion in later years was the CIA should not exist. It's the worst thing to happen if you want to live in a constitutional republic. It's totally contradictory because it's total secret government. They may well turn out to be the most powerful part of the deep state on influencing what goes on behind the scenes. And let's hope our new president doesn't sound like he's going to get bullied around, but we'll have to wait and see.
The silver lining may be that he can go in there and really clean out, but the question is, what kind of people will he move in? But, I thought one thing when you were talking about history, it just shows the danger of precedent, too, because, as you said, maybe President Truman didn't have this in mind, but then Eisenhower came in with the Dulles brothers behind him, and they pushed the covert action they turned it to 11, and that set the precedent for the future.
Well, the other day when we were interviewing Doug Casey, I respect, very bright person, and, I was thinking back to those times, and I asked him, do you think it's as bad as it was back when we had Allen Dulles? And his answer is sort of startling. No, he says it's much worse. I don't know how it could get much worse than what we've had in the past. But anyway, I think this information is used for people to gain special advantages. In a way, I guess we're participating in that. We want to promote our beliefs as well, and that is be questioning all the time about what our government tells us, be questioning about what the CIA says, and I think that is, really the most important thing that we can do to try to sort out the truth. And we're in this period of time where it's going to be sorted out. We're talking about fake news, and we're talking about Congress cracking down to solve this problem and regulate speech on the internet. So it's a tough battle and one worth paying a lot of attention to. I want to thank everybody for tuning in today to the Liberty Report. Please come back soon.